Emma sat on the dusty floor of her grandmother's attic, surrounded by old boxes and forgotten memories. The house below felt so empty without Grandma Rose's soft voice calling her name or the gentle sound of her knitting needles clicking together. In the evening, Emma was only 12, but she felt like the loneliest person in the whole world. She opened another cardboard box, hoping to find something that would make her feel close to her grandmother again. Inside, beneath a pile of yellowed letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, her fingers touched something cold and smooth. Emma pulled out an ornate brass key. Unlike anything she had ever seen before, the key was beautiful in a mysterious way. Swirling patterns covered every inch of its surface, and tiny symbols were carved along its edges. When the afternoon sunlight, streaming through the small attic window, hit the key, the patterns seemed to dance and shimmer. Emma held it up to the light, turning it slowly in her palm. It felt surprisingly heavy and warm, as if it had been waiting just for her to find it. "What did you use this for, Grandma?" Emma whispered to the quiet room, her voice barely louder than the dust settling round her dot. Emma stood up, brushing the dust from her jeans, and decided to solve the mystery. She ran down the creaky attic stairs and began trying the key in every lock she could find. She tried the front door with its old brass lock. Nothing. She tried the back door that led to Grandma's rose garden. The key wouldn't even go in halfway. She tried the wooden chest in her grandmother's bedroom where Rose kept her quilting supplies. Still nothing. Emma tried the desk drawers, the jewelry box, and even the old trunk in the hallway. With each failed attempt, her heart sank a little more. The key was so beautiful and felt so important, but it didn't seem to belong anywhere in this house that had been her grandmother's home for over 40 years. When her parents found her sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by open drawers and boxes, they looked tired and sad. They had been packing Grandma Rose's belongings for 3 days now, and Emma could see the exhaustion in their eyes. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" her mother asked. Sitting down beside her on the worn carpet, Emma held up the brass key, hoping her parents might recognize it. "I found this in Grandma's attic. I thought it might open something important, but it doesn't fit any lock in the house." Her father glanced at the key and shrugged gently. Her mother took it from Emma's hand, looked at it for a moment, then handed it back with a sad smile. "Just an old key, love," her mother said, her voice heavy with grief. "Probably nothing important. Your grandmother kept many things from the old days that don't really matter anymore." But as Emma looked at the key resting in her palm, she felt something her parents couldn't understand. This key was different. Something about it made her heart beat faster, made her feel like she was holding a secret that only she could understand. Maybe it was because Emma felt just like this key right now. Beautiful but lost. Special but not fitting anywhere. Since Grandma Rose had died 3 months ago, Emma felt like she was floating through life without a purpose. Nothing seemed to fit right anymore. Her best friend Sarah had moved to another city over the summer, leaving Emma without anyone who really understood her. Next week, she would start at a new school because her family had moved to be closer to Grandma Rose during her final months. Emma tucked the key into her pocket and spent the rest of the day helping her parents pack. Every few minutes, she would touch the key through her pocket, feeling its weight and warmth. It gave her a strange kind of comfort, like carrying a piece of her grandmother with her. That evening, after her parents had gone to bed, Emma sat at her bedroom window looking out at the stars. She placed the brass key on her bedside table where the moonlight could reach it. In the soft silver light, the intricate patterns seemed to glow with their own inner light, and the mysterious symbols looked like they were trying to tell her something important. Emma didn't understand what that something was, but she knew in her heart that this key was special. It had to be, Grandma Rose never kept anything that wasn't meaningful. Emma remembered how her grandmother always said that everything happens for a reason, and that sometimes the most important discoveries come when we least expect them. As Emma drifted off to sleep, she made herself a promise. She would find out what this key was meant to open, even if it took her forever. Maybe it would help her find where she belonged in this new life without her grandmother. Maybe it would help her understand the secret message she was sure Grandma Rose had left just for her. The key sat quietly on the bedside table, waiting patiently for tomorrow's adventures. Emma's first day at Riverside Primary School felt like walking into a room where everyone spoke a different language. She stood at the entrance, clutching her backpack straps tightly, watching groups of children laughing and hugging each other after the summer holidays. They all seemed to know exactly where they belonged, while Emma felt like a puzzle piece that had fallen out of the wrong box during morning break. Emma sat alone on a wooden bench in the playground, watching the other children play games she didn't know the rules to. She slipped her hand into her pocket and felt the familiar weight of her grandmother's brass key. The metal was warm from being close to her body, and touching it made her feel a little less alone. Emma pulled the key out carefully, making sure no one was watching. The sunlight made the carved pattern shine, and she traced the mysterious symbols with her finger, wondering what story they might tell. She was so focused on the key that she didn't notice a boy with curly brown hair walking toward her. "What's that thing you're holding?" asked the boy. His name was Thomas, and Emma had seen him in her new class that morning. He was popular and confident, the kind of person who seemed to make friends easily. Emma's heart jumped with hope. Maybe this was her chance to make a friend. "It's a special key," she said, holding it out for him to see. Her voice was quiet but excited. "I found it in my grandmother's house. I'm trying to find what it opens." Thomas took the key and turned it over in his hands, frowning. "It's just an old key," he said. "Keys open locks, not magic wishes or anything like that." He laughed, but not in a mean way. It was the kind of laugh adults make when children believe in fairy tales. But other children heard Thomas laughing and came over to see what was funny. Soon Emma was surrounded by curious faces, all looking at her and the key she held so carefully. "Emma thinks her key is magical," Thomas announced to the group. More children giggled, and someone called it the magic key in a teasing voice. Emma's cheeks turned bright red, and she quickly put the key back in her pocket. The children lost interest and ran off to play, leaving Emma sitting alone again on the bench. For the rest of that first week, Emma ate lunch by herself while other children sat with their friends, sharing snacks and telling stories about their summer adventures. She tried to join conversations, but she always felt like she was interrupting something private. The brass key stayed hidden in her pocket, but she touched it often, drawing comfort from its solid presence. Every afternoon after school, Emma walked slowly through the village streets instead of going straight home. She carried the key with her everywhere, hoping to find someone who might recognize it or know what it was meant to open. The village was small, with narrow cobblestone streets and old buildings that looked like they held many secrets. Emma visited Mrs. Patterson's antique shop on High Street, where the elderly woman looked at the key through her thick glasses and shook her head sadly. "It's lovely, dear, but I've never seen anything quite like it," Mrs. Patterson said kindly. "Perhaps it's from somewhere far away." She showed the key to Mr. Williams at the hardware store. Thinking he might know about old locks, he examined it carefully but couldn't help either. "Might be decorative," he suggested. Some keys were made just to look pretty, not to actually open anything. Emma visited the museum on weekends, hoping the curator might recognize the symbols carved into the key's surface. she asked elderly people she met in the park, thinking someone from her grandmother's generation might remember seeing a similar key. But week after week, no one could tell her what the key was for. One particularly rainy Tuesday afternoon, Emma felt more discouraged than ever. She had been carrying the key for almost a month now, and she was no closer to solving its mystery. The other children at school had stopped teasing her about it, but that was only because they had forgotten she existed. She still ate lunch alone and walked home by herself every day. Emma found herself sitting on a wooden bench outside the village library, rain dripping from her hair and jacket. She pulled out the brass key and stared at it through tears of frustration. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe it was just a useless old piece of metal. Maybe she was foolish for thinking it could lead her to something special. "Excuse me, dear," said a gentle voice beside her. Emma looked up to see an elderly man with kind grey eyes and a warm smile. He was wearing a brown cardigan and carrying a stack of library books. "I'm James, the librarian here. You look quite upset. Is everything all right?" Emma hesitated, then decided she had nothing left to lose. She held out the key with trembling hands, expecting another kind but unhelpful response. But James didn't dismiss the key quickly like everyone else had. He took it carefully and examined it closely, turning it over in his weathered hands. His eyes widened slightly as he studied the intricate patterns. "This is quite remarkable," he said softly, his voice full of genuine interest, "you know. Emma, the most important keys don't always open doors made of wood or metal. Sometimes they open hearts, or minds, or new possibilities that we never imagined before. Don't give up searching. Some treasures take time to reveal themselves, and the best ones are always worth waiting for." James the librarian became the first person in the village who truly understood Emma. Every afternoon after school, instead of walking home to an empty house, Emma would push open the heavy wooden doors of the library and breathe in the familiar smell of old books and polished furniture. James would always look up from his desk with a warm smile, as if he had been waiting just for her to arrive. The library became Emma's safe place. James would tell her fascinating stories about keys from different countries and time periods. He showed her pictures of ancient Egyptian keys made of wood, ornate Victorian keys with elaborate designs, and simple iron keys that had opened castle doors hundreds of years ago. But more importantly than the stories, James listened when Emma needed to talk. "Some days I feel like I'm invisible," Emma confided one afternoon as she helped James put returned books back on the shelves at school. "It's like I'm not really there. The other children look right through me." James nodded thoughtfully, his kind eyes understanding her pain. "Being new is never easy," he said gently. "But you know, Emma, sometimes the people who feel most out of place are the ones who end up making the biggest difference in the world. They see things that others miss because they're looking from the outside." Week after week, Emma found herself sharing more and more with James. She told him about the dreams where she could still hear Grandma Rose humming in the kitchen. She talked about how scared she was that she would never make real friends. She explained how the brass key made her feel connected to something important, even when everything else in her life felt uncertain. One rainy afternoon, as they organized a shipment of new children's books, James asked Emma a question that made her face brighten for the first time in weeks. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said, settling into a comfortable chair near the window. "What was she like?" Emma's eyes lit up like candles being lit in a dark room. She had been waiting for someone to ask about Grandma Rose, someone who would really listen to the stories that meant so much to her. "Oh, James, she was the most wonderful person in the whole world," Emma began, her voice growing stronger with each word. Grandma Rose came to England from Ireland when she was just 18 years old. Can you imagine? Being so young and brave, she had nothing but a small suitcase and a heart full of hope. Emma told James how her grandmother had worked 3 different jobs to save money. During the day, she cleaned offices in the city centre. In the evenings, she worked at a small restaurant washing dishes and serving tea. On weekends, she took care of elderly people in their homes, reading to them and helping with household tasks. She never complained. Not once. Emma continued, her voice full of admiration. Grandma Rose always said that every closed door was just waiting for the right moment to open. When things got difficult, she would tell me that hard times don't last, but strong people do. James listened carefully to every word, nodding and asking questions that showed he really cared about Emma's stories. She sounds like a remarkable woman, he said warmly. Just like someone else I know. Emma blushed, feeling a warm glow in her chest that she hadn't experienced since Grandma Rose had been alive. That evening, Emma felt energized by her conversation with James. She decided to look through her grandmother's bedroom one more time, hoping to find something that would help her feel even closer to the woman she missed so much. As she opened the closet door, something caught her eye that she had somehow missed during all the weeks of packing. Behind a row of Grandma Rose's old dresses, Emma found a small wooden box tucked away on a high shelf. The box was plain, but beautifully made, with tiny brass hinges that squeaked softly when she opened it. Inside, Emma discovered a collection of letters tied together with a faded pink ribbon that looked like it had been handled many times over the years. Emma's hands trembled as she untied the ribbon and began reading the letters. They were written in her grandmother's familiar handwriting, but the ink was much older and the paper was yellowed with age. These letters were addressed to someone named Margaret in Dublin, Ireland. As Emma read letter after letter, she began to understand that Margaret had been Grandma Rose's younger sister. These were letters that Rose had written during her first years in England, when she was young and lonely and trying to build a new life in a strange country. Emma's heart began to race as she read one particular letter that made everything clear. In careful handwriting, Grandma Rose had written to her sister, "Dear Margaret, I carry with me a small brass key that belonged to our dear mother. I have tried it in every lock I can find, but it doesn't open any door or chest that I have discovered. Yet I keep it with me always, because it reminds me that every single day is a door waiting to be opened. When I feel lost and alone in this big city, I hold this key tight in my hand and remember that belonging isn't about fitting into spaces that already exist. It's about creating new spaces where love can grow and flourish." Emma looked down at the brass key in her palm, seeing it with completely new eyes. This wasn't just any mysterious key. This was Grandma Rose's key. This was her grandmother's key of hope, passed down from her great-grandmother, carried across an ocean and now resting in Emma's hands. The next morning, Emma walked through the school gates with a completely different feeling in her heart. The brass key still rested safely in her pocket, but now she understood why her grandmother had kept it for so many years. It wasn't meant to open a door or a chest. It was meant to remind her that she had the power to create belonging wherever she went. During her first class, Emma found herself looking round the classroom with new eyes. She noticed things she had missed before because she had been so focused on her own loneliness. There was a girl named Lucy who sat in the back corner, always by herself, reading books during break time instead of playing with the other children. Emma had seen her before but had been too wrapped up in her own problems to really notice that Lucy looked just as lonely as she felt. When lunchtime came, Emma made a decision that felt both scary and exciting. instead of taking her usual seat at the empty table by the window. She walked across the cafeteria to where Lucy sat alone with her sandwich and a thick book about adventure stories. "Excuse me," Emma said, her voice a little shaky with nerves. "Would you like to sit together? I mean, if you want some company while you eat." Lucy looked up from her book with surprise. And then her whole face brightened like sunshine breaking through clouds. "I'd like that very much," she said, closing her book and making space at the table. "I was just thinking how quiet it is eating alone every day," as they shared their lunches. Emma discovered that Lucy was dealing with many of the same feelings she had been struggling with. Lucy had moved to the village from Scotland just 2 months ago when her father got a new job. She missed her old friends and felt like everyone at Riverside Primary had already formed their groups without any room for newcomers. "I keep hoping someone will invite me to join," Lucy admitted, picking at her apple slices. "But everyone seems so busy with their own friends. Sometimes I wonder if there's something wrong with me." Emma felt her heart ache with recognition. "There's nothing wrong with you," she said firmly. "I felt exactly the same way, but maybe we've been looking at this all wrong." Emma pulled out the brass key and told Lucy the whole story. She explained about finding it in Grandma Rose's attic, about searching for locks it might open, about the letters that revealed its true meaning. Lucy listened with wide eyes, holding the key carefully when Emma let her examine it. "My grandfather used to tell me something similar," Lucy said thoughtfully, turning the key over in her hands. "He said that feeling different is the first step to making a difference in the world. He said the people who don't fit in right away are often the ones who end up helping others feel like they belong." Word about Emma's story began to spread through the school in the gentle way that meaningful things do. It wasn't gossip or teasing this time. Instead, children who had felt left out themselves were drawn to the idea that being different might actually be a good thing. During the following week, other lonely children began joining Emma and Lucy at lunch. There was David, a quiet boy, who loved reading fantasy novels but was too shy to join the book club because he was afraid the other members would think his ideas were silly. There was Anna, a cheerful girl who had trouble making friends because her family didn't have much money for the fashionable clothes and gadgets that seemed so important to many of her classmates. Michael, a thoughtful boy who felt different because he was adopted and looked different from his loving parents, started eating with them too. Each new person brought their own story, their own struggles, and their own special qualities that had made them feel like they didn't fit in. Emma found herself becoming the natural leader of this growing group of friends. She suggested they start meeting regularly, not just for lunch, but after school as well. She asked James if they could use a corner of the library for their gatherings, and the kind librarian was delighted to help. "What should we call ourselves?" Anna asked one afternoon as they sat in a circle on the library's comfortable reading chairs. Emma touched the brass key in her pocket and smiled. "How about the Key Club?" she suggested. "Because we're all learning that being different is like having a special key. We just need to figure out what doors we're meant to open." The Key Club became a place where children could share stories about their families, talk about their dreams for the future, and discuss times when they felt like they didn't belong. They discovered that almost everyone had moments of feeling left out or different. Even the children who seemed most confident and popular. James often watched their meetings from his desk across the library, smiling as he heard their laughter and deep conversations. One afternoon, as Emma was helping him shelve books after the other children had gone home, he put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You know, Emma," he said warmly, "I think you've finally discovered what your grandmother's key opens. It doesn't open doors made of wood or metal. It opens hearts. It opens friendships. It opens possibilities that didn't exist before you decided to use it. Emma looked round the library at the chairs where her new friends had been sitting just minutes before, sharing their stories and supporting each other. She felt warmer and happier than she had since Grandma Rose died. The brass key was still the same mysterious object she had found in the attic. But everything else in her world had changed completely. 1 year had passed since Emma first found the brass key in her grandmother's dusty attic, and everything in her world had changed in ways she never could have imagined. On a crisp autumn morning, Emma stood in the peaceful village cemetery, but she was no longer the lonely, lost girl she had been 12 months ago. Surrounding her were the people who had become her closest friends and her chosen family. Lucy stood to her left, holding a bright yellow daisy that reminded everyone of her sunny personality. David was there with a white rose, no longer the shy boy who had been afraid to speak up in groups. Anna carried a handful of wild flowers she had picked from her family's small garden. And Michael held a single red carnation with the same thoughtful care he brought to everything he did. Even James the librarian had come, carrying a bouquet of lavender that filled the air with its gentle fragrance. Emma knelt down beside Grandma Rose's headstone, which was covered with a thin layer of colorful autumn leaves. She placed her own flower, a pink rose that had been her grandmother's favorite, gently on the grave. The stone was simple but beautiful, engraved with the words Rose Margaret O'Sullivan. She opened doors with love. "Thank you, Grandma," Emma whispered, her voice soft but strong. "Your key taught me the most important lesson of my life. Home isn't a place you find by accident. It's a feeling you create with your own hands and heart, one friendship at a time." The Key Club had grown far beyond what Emma had ever dreamed possible. What had started as 5 lonely children eating lunch together had become a movement that touched the entire village. Children from every grade level joined their meetings. They helped each other with difficult homework assignments, shared their lunches with classmates whose families were struggling financially. And most importantly, they made sure that no child at Riverside Primary ever had to face their problems completely alone. The group had organized fundraising events to help families in need, created a buddy system for new students starting school, and even convinced the headmaster to start a monthly assembly where children could share their unique family traditions and cultural backgrounds. Emma had discovered that she was a natural leader, someone who could help others see the best in themselves even when they felt different or left out. As the group walked away from the cemetery together, talking quietly and supporting each other, the way families do, Emma noticed a small figure sitting alone on the front steps of a house they passed. It was her 6-year-old cousin Peter, who looked tiny and worried as he stared down at his shoes. His family had just moved to the village the week before, and Emma knew from her own experience exactly how scary and overwhelming that could feel. Emma excused herself from her friends and walked over to where Peter sat. She could see the anxiety in his small shoulders and the way he kept glancing toward the school building visible in the distance. Tomorrow would be his first day at Riverside Primary, and Emma remembered all too well how frightening that prospect could be. "Hello, Peter," Emma said gently, sitting down on the step beside him. "You look like you might be feeling a little worried about something." Peter looked up at his older cousin with eyes that were trying hard not to cry. "I don't want to go to school tomorrow," he admitted in a small voice. "What if the other children don't like me? What if I don't know how to make friends? What if I sit by myself at lunch every day?" Emma's heart ached with recognition and love for this little boy who was facing the same fears she had conquered. She reached into her pocket and slowly pulled out the brass key that had changed everything. For her, the afternoon sunlight caught the carved patterns, making them shimmer just as they had that first day in Grandma Rose's attic. "Peter," Emma said, her voice warm and confident, "I want to give you something very special. This key belonged to our great-grandmother Rose, the woman you were named after. It doesn't open any lock that you can see with your eyes, but it opens something much more important than any door or treasure chest." Peter's eyes grew wide with wonder as Emma placed the key carefully in his small palm. The metal felt warm and heavy, just as it had when Emma first held it. "What does it open?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity instead of fear. For the first time that afternoon, Emma smiled, thinking of all the hearts that had been opened, all the friendships that had been formed, all the possibilities that had been discovered. Because of this simple piece of brass, it opens hearts. Peter, it opens friendships. It opens the door to finding where you belong in this big world. This key will remind you that being different isn't something to be afraid of. It's something that makes you special and valuable. She leaned closer to her little cousin, speaking in the same gentle tone Grandma Rose had always used when sharing important wisdom. "And Peter, when you're older and you meet someone who feels lost and scared like you do right now, you'll know it's time to pass this key along to them. That's how the magic works, by sharing it with others who need it." Peter nodded seriously, closing his small fingers tightly around the key. Emma could see understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes, the same spark of hope that had carried her through her own difficult journey. As Emma walked home that evening, she felt surrounded by Grandma Rose's love like a warm, invisible hug. The key would continue its journey, helping other children discover that the most important doors in life aren't opened by pieces of metal. They're opened by kindness, courage, and the belief that everyone deserves to belong somewhere special.